let it shine.
Welcome to the Faith, Church and Disability podcast. I'm Geraldine, a trustee on the CBM New Zealand board. At Christian Blind Mission, because we fight to end the cycle of poverty and disability, we're glad to be teaming up with the Baptist NZ Podcast Network to produce this podcast series. Find us online at cbmnz.org.nz and baptist.nz/podcasts. We hope you find this episode inspiring.
I'm Murray Sheard, CEO of CBM New Zealand. CBM is an international development charity focused on people with disabilities, and it's been my great pleasure lately to have some conversations with some people with disabilities and to talk about their lives, the kinds of things that they face, the challenges that they have, and also some of the thinking that has gone on because of their engagement with their disability. And I'm very delighted today to be here with my friend Karen Plimmer. Welcome, Karen.
Kia ora.
Hey, well, I would love it if you could start just by maybe saying a little bit about yourself, introducing yourself, and some of your story.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. It's really an honour. I'm in my early 40s. I live in central Auckland. I've got a beautiful 4-year-old daughter. I'm married, and we've got a 16-year-old cat. I work full-time in the disability sector, have done off and on mostly, apart from a couple of years in a contact centre since I was about 25. And outside of work, I'm a mum, and do a bit of music, and go regularly to a Baptist church on a Sunday morning. In terms of my faith journey, did the sort of Pentecostal thing, I suppose you'd say, in the 90s. Late 90s, went to another Baptist church in another part of New Zealand, and did all sorts of things in my 20s and 30s. Spent some time at a Baptist church, but tried a few other bits and pieces as well, shall we say, outside of Christianity even, which was really interesting. So I guess that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, interesting history, Karen. And
Thank you.
I go to a Baptist church myself, and I actually go to your church.
Yeah.
So we've in fact, that's been interesting for me to, and we can come back to this a little later, to look at how it's been in churches for people with disabilities. I know, particularly yourself. So whether it's church or not church, are there challenges that you face that maybe don't stem from the disability itself, but with the interaction with needless barriers? A number of people with disabilities that I have talked to share with me how a significant part of their life is making a response to some barriers that really maybe shouldn't be there, or in a different world it would be easier. What do you think about that?
The two things that come to mind, and honestly I don't know what the solution is. I'll start with the one which is decreasing first, which is access to written information. A lot of us don't realise that written information is not just books. It's signage, it's labels on tins of food, it's nutrition panels. I didn't even know until, sometime in the last 10 years that there are used by dates on medicines. So, because I was born blind, and the reason that barrier is decreasing is that a lot of that information is either easily available digitally, or can be, So I can have stuff emailed to me, or I can Google things, or I use some apps on my phone to actually take photos of things, and it can read it back. And I want to add in there straight away that, you know, that I'm coming from a place of privilege, being able to do that. You know, for everyone like me that's got that access to that technology, because it's not necessarily cheap. You know, there's probably who knows how many others that either don't have access to it financially, or it's just really hard to learn it.
Yeah.
I actually used to teach people how to use that stuff for about 10 years, and the learning curve, man, is such a headache. So yeah, that's the one that I feel is decreasing, but it's still there for a lot of people.
It sounds so important, right?
Yeah.
This is expiry dates on medicines, and I suppose also on food, right?
Yeah.
So something that the rest of us absolutely take for granted, for you has been an issue. For the context that I deal with overseas, people wouldn't have that technology at all.
No.
But even here, it's relatively new. Yeah. So that's something that's decreasing, but has been a bit of an issue in the past. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, it never, you know, it's never really affected me. I mean, you know, if you're dealing with milk or something, you know, you can do the smell test. It's all cool, but yeah, like I can imagine it would for other people, you know, become a problem if it, you know, because I always had sort of fallback plans, like somebody coming in to check that stuff, or you know, just being mindful of how long we've had things. But yeah, the medicines thing, only really became apparent to me when we had somebody supporting us at home, and we were like, can you help us clean out our medicine cabinet, because I just hadn't got around to putting braille labels on some things, and this thing expired 5 years ago. Okay. Right.
I'm terrible at using expired medicines, but my wife tells me off.
Right. Yeah. I didn't open it up to find out. Yeah.
How about how is New Zealand doing in terms of just people such as yourself being able to get around? You know, footpaths, transport.
I was going to come to that. The second big thing is the transport. So I think New Zealand is so it's going to sound really rude, but I think a very car-centric culture, certainly here in Auckland. I've felt really kind of cranky at times since becoming a mum. It's almost like assumed that you have a car as a parent, and that because on all the parents' things is, you know, there's parking here. No one expects me to walk in with a 6-month-old baby and a car seat, or, you know, 18-month-old child. You know, hold on my hand. It's not, you know, we're in a car park here, hold on to mummy's hand, and trying to hold on to a car seat and a cane at the same time. Yeah, that was interesting with the stage 2 car seat for a couple of years. And I don't know what the solution is to that. It'd be just nice to know. I want to say to anyone who's listening, who's running a daycare centre or who's doing anything with families or parents, like, you know, not every parent drives, and, you know, there are some parents out there who do have disabilities, and sometimes I kind of get the feeling like, as the mum, I'm not supposed to have a disability.
Right.
Oh my gosh, what are you doing here? That's so awkward. Yeah.
Right. So they might be catering for a child with a disability, but the assumption,
lucky.
If they're lucky, But the assumption is not. They don't tend to think about the parent. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm going to take my daughter for one of her well child checks this afternoon, and I've already texted the provider to say, you know, I'm blind, and then I got a text on Friday saying, oh no, it's not at this place, we've moved it to this other place. And I'm just like, okay, now I've got to, you know, line all the planets up to hope that I actually find it. I've got a physical address, but it's somewhere inside some community place.
Yeah. And when you
have my daughter in the car seat and the bag. And
Yeah.
This is going to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you've got to a place, has it been different from what you expected, or or just not being able to find the right person or find
the right door?
Yeah. I mean, it feels just the emotion I have. It sounds very vulnerable.
Yes.
And quite scary. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I have to say, our church, I feel, has been really responsive around that. Like when I've said, because we have multiple doors into our building, because we've got this awesome community centre there that does all that amazing stuff. And a couple of times when I've been going to church, like I've put on Facebook, okay, I'm coming in about 15 minutes. I put on our church Facebook group, I'm coming in about 15 minutes. Can someone keep an eye out for an Uber or a taxi, and it's this colour and this is the number plate? And people do really step up, and people just say, oh yeah, I'll take the car seat off your hands. And, and they do listen when I say, oh, can you put that in a place where we can find it, but no one will trip over it. So yeah, I feel like people have really stepped up, and I've found, which has been amazing. I've found a couple of people who live close to me as well, so they can help us out a bit with transport. So the transport thing is feels like the biggest thing for me at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and is some of that just getting into people's awareness that it's not so simple for everybody. So I'm thinking of our church, and I know that it has an access ramp, but
the door is always locked.
You're laughing and I'm laughing, because sometimes it can be locked, but also once you get up there, it's relatively steep, but then there's another sort of ramp to get into the main auditorium. Yeah. And a friend of mine who uses a wheelchair has said, look, you guys think your church is accessible, and technically it is, but no, it's been really difficult for me. So are there, what do you think needs to change in people's minds or hearts, I suppose?
I feel like we're doing okay, and I know we're looking at the accessibility stuff with our church, with the ramps and things, but I think there's this assumption that people with disabilities, that will move and participate in a predictable way. I know a friend of mine who used to have a role on the council at Monaco City, I think, said that, like, when she was talking to somewhere in Monaco about accessibility, you need to make this pedestrian crossing accessible. And I said, well, how many blind people actually use it? Like, well, what if some blind family from Albany choose to come to this place on a Saturday? There's kind of this thing around pinning down, well, how many people who use wheelchairs come to this church, or how many want to come, or what days do you want to come? Almost
as if you're making a calculation, is it going to be worth it?
Is it going to be worth it?
One person.
Yeah. I think that is it. Is it, is it going to be worth it? Yeah.
And the interesting thing there for me is, it's chicken and egg, right? I mean, if it was there, then that would be a welcome mat. That would be the invitation to come. Yes. And so this, I think, is one of the challenges for churches, that you may not seek to exclude, but actually, if you aren't taking active steps to include, then you are excluding, even if it's not your intention. And sometimes that is costly, and yet as the welcoming kingdom of God, it is really a reflection of God's love that we would make that step.
Yeah.
And so, as well as things like physical barriers and what people do or do not do about them, how about questions of people's, say, stereotypes or assumptions? What's your journey on that? What have you experienced?
Yeah, so it's been really interesting, having been in probably 3 or 4 different Christian denominations. I had some time in Anglican churches as well. So being in sort of 3 or 4 different Christian denominations as well, and there's huge variations within all of that. But yeah, some of the ones which have been kind of less fun, I guess, have been this whole thing, this assumption that I actually want to be healed. And yeah, I don't get that at our church, but I've had a couple of Uber drivers this year who were Christians, and this one dude like insisted on praying for me while we were on the journey. I'm thinking, dude, I hope you don't have your eyes closed right now. Because he wanted to pray for me at the end of the trip, and I'm just like, I've got a meeting at 11:30. Oh, no worries, I'll pray for you now. Okay, I'm just so that whole thing, assumption that I want to be healed, and I can revisit that because that one's complicated.
Yeah.
But and the other one that's really tricky is assumptions that I want to be supported in certain ways.
Okay.
And just the one that I can sort of work with it because I'm used to that, to people going, sort of talking to me loudly, or I don't know if you can manage those stairs and things like that.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm used to kind of making my point across and kind of putting them at ease at the same time. But this really random thing which happens socially, which I find quite not very nice, is when people at, say, morning tea or some gathering, and it's not just in the church either, give me a cup of tea and put me on a chair, and then everybody's talking. I can hear everybody's talking, but I'm just like sitting there by myself.
Right.
And I'm not sure whether to try and break in. As I've gotten older, I've gotten a little more bolshy with that, and just kind of stood up and gone, somebody might say, "Oh, are you all right?" I was like, "Oh, I just wanted to come and talk to somebody because I was sitting there all by myself."
Yeah.
Okay,
so that's interesting, because so they've taken a step.
Yeah, they've done something.
But the friendship step, which is really crucial, right?
Well, the social step.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that, I expect to like stay, and form a close friendship over a cup of tea, for heaven's sake. But, it's feels pretty stink when you're just sitting there by yourself and you can hear everybody else talking, and, there's this whole thing that starts up in my head about, oh my gosh, do I look really weird? Did I just not put my makeup on right? What's this about? And it's used to, it didn't sometimes happen to me at church, and it's just a bit of a lonely place when that happens.
Do you think that there's maybe a discomfort, or I don't know what to do here, and the easiest thing is just to say, here's the cup of tea, and then step back down. And so so I wonder whether some of it is just sitting with that discomfort and actually just being able to step through it, right? And you also mentioned people saying, I don't know if you can manage the stairs and things like that. What is the kind of thing you'd like to hear instead of those things?
I think it is around asking some good questions, like, what do you need from me to get in here safely? How can I help you today? How can I support you in the service? How those kinds of open-ended questions are really helpful.
What's the best thing for me to do?
What's the best thing? Is there anything we can do to support you?
Sure.
Yeah. And I've been known to say to people, thanks, I'm okay at the moment, but are you going to be around for another 5 minutes? Can I just give you a shout if I'm stuck? Or, things like that. Those of us who've been at this for a while, we've developed those kinds of responses. So, we're used to answering those kinds of questions.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, like you say, you just need to be a bit bullshit sometimes, because
I do.
especially if it's new people. If it's people that then you can educate them, right? But if it's new people,
Yeah.
you're sort of back to square one. So being a bit bolshy is
Yeah.
probably a bit needed, eh?
Yeah. I think, somehow I ended up with some kind of conditioning to not do that, but kind of breaking out of that now. We were just going back to asking me about stereotypes, that's been a really interesting journey for me. I used to get pretty angry about that when I was in my certainly teens and 20s, and these people who get these stupid stereotypes from film and da-da-da-da. And these days I tend to think, well, actually, we all would have realised, I did a little bit of study of anthropology in my late 20s, and then I started to recognise that, in fact, we all have our unconscious biases and our stereotypes and all those things. And I was doing it just as much as anybody, be that about ethnicity, gender, whatever you like. And so now I tend to think people are coming, when somebody does something that I find a bit not so great, I tend to think, okay, they're coming with these assumptions based on whatever they've read or that sort of thing. And while that might be harmful, not helpful in the moment, it just helps me to give them a little bit of space to go, well, they're approaching me based on what they know. They didn't wake up this morning with, thinking about how to make my day bad, not great. They're just coming with their assumptions, and it also helps me not to get into a really angry place in my head. So to actually remember that they are an image bearer of God as well is really important to me.
Right. So you've journeyed a bit from those initial more angry responses. And I guess understanding the humanity of others.
And it certainly hasn't been a straight trajectory.
No,
I still have days where I think those things which are really unhelpful, both to me and to my encounter with the other person. So
CBM wants to do more around educating of churches. It's one of the reasons we're doing this podcast series as well. And it sounds like for a number of people, it's, as you say, it's just an assumption, or it's unfamiliarity perhaps of they weren't maybe expecting to encounter someone today who was in a wheelchair or was blind. And then just making that adjustment. And maybe if they knew a few, like you said, some simple questions to ask, then it wouldn't be such a threatening space. So it's like anything, if we've encountered it before, then it's easier the next time. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation too, because then people can hear some of the things that you've struggled with, and then some of the responses that might be better for you. So we've talked about Christians' responses in church. What about outside of church? So employment, for example. What can people do for example, workplaces, people with disabilities?
Okay.
What would you say about that?
Sure. Thank you for asking that, because statistically, people with disabilities actually getting into work feels like a perennial issue, to be honest. It's been around for as long as I can remember, but currently for blind and low vision people, digital accessibility is really important. So for anybody who is in IT, especially in the area of building databases, that kind of work, if there's any way they connect, because the thing is, I think what happens again with that whole space is you might say, okay, do you actually have any blind or low vision employees here? Oh, no, okay, we don't need to. But in fact, what can happen is, 12, 18 months later, that place hires somebody or considers hiring somebody who has got the qualifications. digitally it's not accessible. And then so what's happened to so many of us is we're then at the mercy of the sort of goodwill of our line manager or supervisor to actually stay in that job and providing workarounds, or there is a little bit of funding there from other government sources, but I mean you've got to write assessment reports and stuff to access even that. So if that kind of stuff was accessible from the get-go, it would be a lot less of an issue. And again, same for anybody who's in a sort of supervisory role in their workplace, like give us those opportunities, please.
Yeah, I'm interested in this as an employer. So there's a few things that we do around, say, recruitment, for example. We sometimes make we've made a video that has sign language, for example, cool. As well as an ad. But then there's questions around accessible websites as well. And then, of course, doing accessibility audits of the place that you're in. But and here's something interesting, which I sort of didn't expect. We have tried to put... We also send our recruitment ads out to some organisations of people with disabilities around New Zealand. But we find that we haven't yet had many applicants. So it was interesting, because we thought we were doing something,
right,
and we are, but we weren't quite getting the applicants. And I'm wondering what else we could be doing for a start. I wonder what's going on there.
I think you're doing all the things, Murray. I do. Honestly, I think between the transport issues and the digital accessibility stuff, a lot of people don't either give up on their studies, or unfortunately they've been brought up in contexts where it's assumed that you're blind or low vision, therefore you can't do anything for yourself. So I mean, just thinking of that community, I think a lot of it's that. The thing that used to scare me on a lot of job ads was when I saw you must have your own vehicle and full driver's license, or must have full and clean driver's license, and I'm going, okay, do I even bother applying? Do I, sometime on a bad day, some of us would read that as blind people need not apply, basically.
And so you've got that question of like, maybe I don't need it. But on the other hand, of course, if it's maybe a driving job, then maybe I do. But
a career driver, of course that's understandable that you would.
But some people probably put that up because it's just it's one of those things that people do. It's like, we have to put these requirements, and maybe it's not as necessary. And if the workplace maybe thought that through, they might find, well, do we really need someone to have a driver's license?
So say for like a case manager role or something. So I mean, there have been times when some of us have just phoned if we've known the line manager, and just phoned them and said, does that really, you really need that? But then if you're cold calling and you're disclosing in that context that you've got a disability, well, I guess it's one way to save time preparing your cover letter and everything. But it's just like, okay, on a bad day, as I say, that just feels like a door slamming in the face right there.
Which is, of course, a vicious cycle, because a lot of people with disabilities could work, and if they aren't given those opportunities, then they're back basically being supported, where actually they would prefer to, I guess like anyone, to be able to contribute at a job, and then also get the on-the-job skills that people get to be able to, enhance their career.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
On the towering hillsides of Nepal, Dinesh was born with only one leg. He couldn't walk, run, play games, or go to school. His loving family worried for his future. It doesn't have to be this way. For just $1 a day, you can transform a child's life. Call CBM Christian Blind Mission on 0800 77 2264 or visit cbmnz.org.nz.
Karen, you've talked about the taxi driver before, and I know for some people in churches there is a theology of, well, God heals all, so God must be able to step in here, and yet of course we know that it's not always the case. Not everyone is healed. We know that, and so there's questions there. I guess there's questions there about theology, but there's also questions of what kind of assumptions that people are making. How has that experience been for you, and what would you prefer people did or didn't ask or say around questions of healing?
What I'd like people to consider, Murray, is that especially for those of us who've had a disability from pretty early on, things like walking, talking, hearing, seeing are all developed for most people in those first couple of years of life. Along with the physical side of it, if you like, there's big areas of the brain devoted to this stuff. So there's a whole area of the brain called the visual cortex. For example, my situation, if say I were to get healed in a prayer meeting or something, I don't know how long it would take me to learn to actually see and understand my world in a way that made sense.
Yeah. So you have sense data coming in.
Yeah.
But the mechanisms for interpreting it.
Seeing is actually made up of a whole lot of different skills, is one way you can think of it. So there's focusing, where you actually, set your sight, I believe it is, on one object. There's tracking, which you use to read across a page. There's colour recognition. There's visual motor coordination. And you need all of those skills and probably some more I haven't mentioned for driving. There's long distance, there's close up, there's all these things. So I actually wonder, if I were to be healed, how long it would take me to learn to do all those things. Would I be supported by the church? Oh, God healed you. You can see now. You don't need, what are you doing? You don't need a ride home. Or, would there be somebody who would just hang out with me till we were done? And I know it's kind of like the reverse of rehabilitation is how I'd think of it. And I know when adults, quite often when they lose their sight, and a lot of things that they just always struggle with. And, would that be the case for me? So, just please consider that before you go jump in praying for somebody for healing. Yeah. And
I've heard from so some friends I have who are deaf have said also, and they've been deaf since birth, that they're part of a deaf community.
Yes.
And they actually feel affronted by the idea that someone might be somehow yanked out of that community.
Yeah.
Is that part of your world as well?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I think it'd be really interesting to see how that changed. I don't feel that quite so strongly. Some of my friends definitely would. But, yeah, I don't know how that dynamic, if sudden, within, say, 3 years of getting my driver's license, I'd just want to drive all my friends everywhere. I don't know how to do that.
You're the designated driver.
Yeah.
Oh, Karen, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
I know you do think deeply around these issues, so I was really, really looking forward to this conversation. So I appreciate it very much. Now, for people listening, if you're interested in the question of recruitment in workplace, if you want to get in touch with me, you're very welcome to. My details will be on the website, because CBM has gone down that journey a little bit. Small steps, but the difference between tokenism and small steps is that for small steps you continue to take them one after another, and so we have a few ideas around that if you would like to access that. So Karen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
This great joy is mine. Thank you for listening. For more information about CBM, find us online at cbmnz.org.nz. For more great podcasts, go to baptist.nz/podcasts.